The witness.
Mr. Maxwell, did you swear in the other day? You did not? I did not. Okay. Repeat after me. I do solemnly swear and affirm. I do solemnly swear and affirm. And affirm. As a witness in the impeachment proceeding. Shall be admitted. I'm sorry. I read the wrong line. Let me start from the beginning. I do solemnly swear and affirm, you've read that, that the evidence I give upon this hearing, the Senate of Texas impeachment, charges against Warren Kenneth Paxton Jr., shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Please be seated. You may begin.
If you'll move that microphone pretty close, we have a little problem with acoustics in here. Please tell the senators your name. Yep. Got it.
There we go. My name is David Maxwell.
Mr. Maxwell, your last position with the Attorney General was as Director of Law Enforcement. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I want to ask you some questions about your law enforcement career. Can you tell us where you started and when?
I started in 1972 with the Texas Department of Public Safety. I went through the patrol school, graduated April 6 of 1973. Spent 8 years working highway patrol in Harris County. I promoted to narcotics in 1981 and worked narcotics in Harris County for 5 years. I then promoted to Texas Rangers in 1986.
Let me stop you there just for a second. Those of us who were raised in Texas know a lot about, or think we know a lot about the Texas Rangers. What does it take to become a Texas Ranger?
First of all, you have to have 8 years of experience with DPS to be able to apply for the position. When I applied in 1986, it was a little different than it is now, but we had to take a written examination to qualify to go before the oral interview board. And then they would score the oral interview board and combine the two, and then they took the top 5 people and put them on a list for 1 year. If you didn't get promoted in that 1 year, you went back to the first step and started over.
How long did you serve the state of Texas as a Texas Ranger?
25 years as Texas Ranger.
And when you left the Ranger service, where did you go?
I went to the Texas Attorney General's office.
What was your first position there?
My first position was Deputy Director of Law Enforcement.
And did you promote to the Director of Law Enforcement?
I did.
I want to pull up for, please, the organizational chart. It'll be in front of you. I'll ask you a couple of questions about that.
Okay.
Your name and, yes, your name has been highlighted, and it appears to be on a level with other deputies. So what was your rank in the Attorney General's office as it relates to the Deputy Attorney Generals?
I was the Executive Deputy over Law Enforcement Division.
Is that an equal rank with the deputies that were deputies over the other divisions of the Attorney General's office?
Yes, and I was the most senior deputy.
Most senior, how?
I had more time as an executive deputy than the others who were working with me at that time.
How many employees, law enforcement officers and support staff, as well as attorneys, did you supervise?
I had about 350 employees, 205 were commissioned officers, and 19 of them were attorneys.
Were those employees spread out across the state, or were they only in Austin?
We had a majority of them in Austin, but we also had offices around the state.
What is and was, when you were director, the authority of the Law Enforcement Division of the Attorney General's office?
The authority was that of other peace officers in the state. We had jurisdiction over any type of crime that would be committed against the state of Texas.
Did you have a criteria for opening a case as an investigator to be investigated by the Attorney General's Office Criminal Division?
I did.
What was that criteria?
This is the criteria that I set up for investigating public officials. So I had certain requirements. And first of all, I reviewed all the requests that came in for investigations on public officials. And we had a lot of requests, and I didn't approve but just a few every year. We already worked as many cases on public corruption as the Texas Rangers have statutory authority. So we worked.
Excuse me, Your Honor. Excuse me. Non-responsive. The question was, what was your criteria?
What was your criteria for opening an investigation?
The criteria was, at first, I had to have a sworn signed statement from the person who was making the allegation. The second thing was that I had to have a letter from the district attorney who had jurisdiction over the possible cases, saying that they would prosecute those cases if we were able to prove that a case was viable.
Why did you have a criteria such as that, particularly when it comes to investigating public officials?
I set up the criteria in order not to be pulled into situations that are strictly political in nature. I did not want us to be in the position of investigating public officials when there was really no crime being committed.
And did this criteria particularly apply to investigations of public integrity?
Yes.
Do you know who was the district attorney in Travis County in the year 2020?
Margaret Moore.
Did you have a good relationship with Margaret Moore?
I did.
I want to get right to the matters here. Were you asked in some way to meet with a person named Nate Paul?
Yes.
Who asked you to do that?
Jeff Mateer.
Where did Jeff Mateer tell you who had told him to have you meet with Nate Paul?
Objection, hearsay.
That's not hearsay under 803 and 801E2D, Your Honor, with respect.
Mr. Mateer is not alleged to have been a co-conspirator. Objection, hearsay.
It's not.
Hold on one moment. Hold on. And we've been doing a really good job of not using a lot of numbers. I have my whole chart here. It's better for just to say what the answer or objection is, but this is why I have legal counsel here.
Yes, it's 801
Yes.
E2D.
Overruled.
All right, you may state your answer. And the question is, did Mr. Mateer tell you who ordered him to order you to meet with Nate Paul?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said General Paxton ordered me to meet with this individual, that he had a story to tell.
At about the same time, did you hear from an employee of the Travis County District Attorney's Office about Nate Paul?
I did.
I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, but when you first were asked to meet with Nate Paul, did you do some research of your own?
I did.
And what did you find?
I found on the internet that...
Excuse me, with all due respect to Ranger Maxwell, if he's going to recite information that he obtained doing his research, that would be hearsay.
It goes to his state of mind in conducting the investigation, Your Honor, and thus is not hearsay.
It is hearsay.
Well,
Overruled. Continue.
okay. So what did you find when you made your initial investigation of Nate Paul?
I found that Nate Paul was being investigated by the FBI, that they had run search warrants in August of 2019 on his business and his home and a storage facility. I found articles in business journals that talked about lawsuits.
Excuse me. Objection, hearsay. Articles in business journals, that's definitionally hearsay.
Again, it goes to his state of mind, and it's the same, he's answering the same question that the court allowed.
With all due respect, he can testify to what's in his mind under this exception. He can't testify as what the article said.
Sustained.
Nonetheless, did you form an opinion of your state of mind?
I did.
And what was that?
My opinion that Nate Paul was a criminal and that we should not be associated with Nate Paul.
At about the same time, did you receive communication from the Travis County District Attorney's Office?
I did.
Your Honor, we have an agreement on House Exhibit 615, which we moved to introduce.
Could I see it, Dick, real quick? I'm sure you're right. Yes. No objection.
It's been admitted. Both sides have agreed.
If we could bring up closer, yeah, I'm being told to tell you to get closer to the mic.
Mr. Maxwell, they just asked you to get closer to the mic when you speak.
Closer to the mic? Yeah. Is that better?
You can pull that towards you a little bit if you'd like.
Okay.
You can pull the whole outfit closer to you.
Okay.
This is the first page. This is the email, and it references a letter. Let's go to the second page, please.
Yes, it was from Don Clemmer.
All right, here's a letter from Don Clemmer. It's dated June 10th, 2020. It's to you. And let's just read it into the record. I am forwarding to you the attached complaint, which was recently received by my office regarding allegations of misconduct by employees of the State Securities Board, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the Department of Public Safety, the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Texas, and a federal magistrate. My office would typically forward such a complaint to the Public Integrity Unit of the Texas Rangers for review. However, since an employee of the Department of Public Safety is one of the subjects of the complaint, referral to the Rangers would appear inappropriate. I am therefore requesting that your agency conduct the review. My first question, is the word review significant?
Yes.
What is its significance?
In the protocols that we had set forth, we first review the request before we ever make a determination on whether we'd actually open up an investigation.
Now, you're familiar with a district attorney's office excusing or recusing itself from an investigation, aren't you?
Yes.
Is that what this was?
Yes, they were forwarding it to us. They didn't feel like that it was up to them to do this investigation.
Now, we saw the email that Mr. Clemmer sent about the same time, and it mentions that you should call him if you'd like. Did you call him?
Yes, I did.
And did you talk to him?
Yes, I did.
What did he tell you?
Excuse me, objection.
It comes in, I know he's going to object to hearsay. Under Rule 803.3, it's an expression by Mr. Clemmer of his then existing motive, intent, and plan.
Not only do I have to object, I want to object. Hearsay.
Yeah. Sustained.
Maybe I didn't clearly state my citation of the code or of the evidence rules, Your Honor, 803.3.
I've ruled. Continue.
All right. Whatever, and don't go into the words that Mr. Clemmer said, was it consistent with what you had already found, or the suspicions that you already had.
Yes,
And what were your suspicions?
that the referral was being requested by General Paxton.
And what about the validity of the referral and the complaint?
Excuse me, objection, conjecture, and speculation.
Oh, this would be his evaluation, which was his job to do.
He hasn't done anything yet. Objection, conjecture, and speculation. You're asking him to testify as to the validity of a complaint which he hasn't investigated yet. That would be conjecture and speculation.
Let me lay a letter.
Overruled.
Okay, go ahead.
I can answer the question.
Yes.
My evaluation of the allegations made by Nate Paul is that they were absolutely ludicrous, without merit, no probable cause, not even reasonable belief that a crime had been committed.
Now let me step aside for just a moment and say, or ask you, what were the nature of the allegations that Mr. Nate Paul was making?
The nature of the allegations that he was making were against the FBI, an investigator with the Texas State Security Board, 2 U.S. attorneys, the senior federal magistrate, Mark Lane, and others who were involved in the chain of the signing and execution of the search warrants on his business, his place of storage, and also his home.
Now, one of your areas to investigate, one of your duties was to investigate public integrity, correct?
Yes,
If there had been credible allegations against the State Securities Board, the DPS, the FBI, federal magistrate, U.S. attorney, would you have any hesitation of going forward?
Objection, excuse me, objection, bolstering, and self-serving.
Overruled. Continue.
You may answer.
no, I would not.
Did you have any hesitation even to meet with Nate Paul?
I did not want to meet with Nate Paul, and I expressed my concerns to Jeff Mateer about that.
And what was the reply?
He said that he was getting a lot of pressure from General Paxton for me to do this.
All right. Let's go to July the 21st of 2020. Did you have a meeting with Nate Paul and his lawyer?
I did.
What was the reason you had that meeting?
I told Jeff Mateer that I would consent to let him tell his story, and that if he made any statements against his interest, I would report it to the FBI.
So on July the 21st, did you have the meeting?
I did.
Where?
It was on the first floor of the Clements building. It was in the office of our security office, where we have a conference room that has the capability of recording video and sound.
Who wanted that to be done? That is, record by video and sound the meeting, but with Nate Paul and his lawyer and yourself.
Me.
Are you familiar with a report that was later put out by the Attorney General's office claiming that General Paxton wanted that meeting recorded?
That is false.
So, have you reviewed the transcript of that meeting?
I have.
Are you aware that the lawyers for General Paxton have been supplied with both the audio and video and transcript of that meeting? What took place?
Okay. Yes, I'm aware of that.
Okay. What took place at that meeting?
Say it again.
What took place at that meeting?
Nate Paul laid out his conspiracy theory about what happened the day of the search warrants were executed. He had complaints about the procedural part that the FBI took when they were securing the scene and conducting the searches. And then he laid out his conspiracy theory that they had originally come to search for not records, but for drugs and guns. And that in the middle of the search, when they didn't find any drugs and guns, they then altered the search warrant to be the search warrant that was executed, where it was for records. And he further stated that the people involved in that was the FBI agent, the agent from the Texas Securities Board, Alan Bowie, who was AUSA, and Mark Lane, the senior magistrate.
So according to his complaint, a United States federal magistrate was involved in this conspiracy?
That's correct.
As a law enforcement officer of many years, what did you think of that?
It was ludicrous.
Did you ask for any documentation?
Yes, I did.
Are you familiar with the crime of obstruction of justice?
I am.
Are you familiar with the crime of interference of a law enforcement investigation?
Of a federal investigation, yes, I am.
What concerns did you have if you had started an investigation based on these claims by Mr. Paul?
My concerns that we would be interfering with a federal investigation, we could be charged with obstruction of justice, and based on a complaint that has absolutely no merit.
And at this time, even at this meeting, had your criteria for opening an investigation been satisfied?
No,
How so?
it doesn't meet any of my requirements.
After that meeting with Mr. Paul, and his lawyer, by the way, was Michael Wynn?
Michael Wynn was there.
Okay. After that meeting with Mr. Paul, did you have a meeting with the Attorney General, General Paxton?
I did not, after that meeting, immediately, no.
No, I don't mean that same day, but did you personally talk to Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, about what had happened in that meeting?
No, I did not.
What did you tell him about the meeting?
I'm sorry. I thought he said he did not meet with Mr. Paxton. And you just asked him what he told Paxton. One of us is confused.
Can we clarify that?
Yeah, could you clarify that? Did you tell him what you thought about that meeting?
I told him before the meeting ever occurred what I thought about us being involved with Nate Paul. That happened before the first meeting.
And what did you tell him?
I told him that he was a criminal.
Sorry. Excuse me, Ranger. Objection asked and answered. He just got through telling us what he told Paxton.
I don't believe it was asked. I don't believe he answered fully what I'm driving at. What did he tell General Paxton?
I'll sustain the objection and you can try one more time again.
Maybe I'm not clear on it. Did you at some time tell General Paxton what you thought about this idea of Mr. Paul, that there was a vast conspiracy against him?
Yes.
What did you tell him?
I told him that Nate Paul was a criminal. He was running a Ponzi scheme that would rival Billy Saul Estes, and that if he didn't get away from this individual and stop doing what he was doing, he was going to get himself indicted.
Nonetheless, was there a second meeting between you and Nate Paul and Nate Paul's lawyer and Mark Penley?
There was.
Why was there a second meeting if you felt like you did after that first meeting?
Because he had talked to he had talked to Mark Penley and told him he wanted him to conduct another meeting with Nate Paul.
When you say he, are you referring to General Paxton?
General Paxton, that's correct.
So General Paxton had told Mr. Penley to get involved in this?
That is correct.
Excuse me. Objection. I'm sorry, Dick. Objection asked and answered. Ranger Maxwell will give his testimony, and Dick will ask him to repeat the same thing. Ask and answer.
I'm going to overrule that. Continue.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify and make sure that we understand. Mark Penley told you that General Paxton had ordered him to now get involved?
This is the third time. Objection asked and answered. He literally just got through testifying to that.
I believe that you
Sustained.
allowed me to ask that.
Sustained.
All right. So did you have a second meeting?
We did.
And was Mr. Penley involved in this one?
He was.
And what was Mr. Penley's role in the Attorney General's office? If we could have that organizational chart again.
Mr. Penley was the executive deputy over criminal prosecution.
So in this chart, he's just next to you, and it's now been highlighted for them for the jurors.
That's correct.
Was he your superior, or was he an equal of yours?
He was an equal.
And what was Mr. Penley's background, briefly?
He came to us from the U.S. Attorney's Office out of Dallas, where he'd been an assistant U.S. attorney.
So at this second meeting, where did it happen?
In the same place as before, in the Clements Building, ground floor, the security office, conference room.
Was it audio, video recorded?
It was.
And is there a transcript of that?
There is.
Have you reviewed that?
I have.
Are you aware that that has been provided to Attorney General Paxton's lawyers?
Yes.
All right. Who wanted that meeting recorded?
I did.
If there's any suggestion that General Paxton wanted that recorded, is that true or false?
Objection asked and answered.
That was the first one. That was the first one that we referred to.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
It's false.
Was there anything new brought up in that meeting as far as you were concerned? You were in both meetings.
He and his lawyer again reiterated the complaints and their conspiracy theory as they had done in the first meeting. I advised them.
Objection. Excuse me.
What did you advise?
Excuse me, Dick. The objection is non-responsive. The question was there anything new? Now Ranger Maxwell is going into what he told them. That's a different answer.
Sustained.
It's correct, and I was trying to meet his objection by going to the next question. So go ahead. The next question is, what happened?
What happened? So during the meeting, they continued to lay out their objections about what happened in the search warrants and the conspiracy theory about how all these different individuals came together and falsified a search warrant during the middle of the search. And I told them that if they believe that to be true, then why aren't they in the office of the Inspector General's office for the federal government, which has the authority to look into any of these complaints, and the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the federal magistrate has to cooperate with them. And I asked them, why aren't you in that office?
Did you get a satisfactory answer to that?
They danced around the answer, but they said they felt like they were in the right place with us.
Did you receive any kind of documents to corroborate or to support that the search warrant had been changed mid-search?
They gave us some documents. They were supposed to give us all the documents, but when we reviewed the documents they gave us, it was not very much. And it certainly wasn't enough for us to really make a determination.
Even still, did you submit those documents to some experts within your office?
I did.
And what's the expertise of the people that you submitted these documents to?
This is my forensics section who does all the forensics on computers and cell phones for criminal cases. And we do that work not only for ourselves, but for the Texas Rangers and others.
All right. By this time, which is, that meeting was August the 5th, by this time, had you become aware yet that General Paxton had ordered Josh Godbee and Mr. McCarty to push a charity to settle in a lawsuit?
No.
Objection.
And by that time,
Excuse me, Dick. Objection, leading and assuming facts not in evidence through this witness.
just asking if he was aware.
Sustained.
Were you aware that Ken Paxton had asked Ryan Bangert to change the state policy?
No.
Were you aware that General Paxton had asked Ryan Vassar to release details of that very ongoing investigation?
Objection, that's a misstatement of the record, and it's assuming facts not in evidence through this witness.
Overruled.
You may answer.
No.
Did you later become aware of those things?
I did.
We'll get to that. Let's talk just for a moment about the records of a search. What is the general practice at least in federal courts, for the sealing, that is, making private the affidavit, the application for a search warrant?
They are sealed to protect people who are involved, may have given information about the crime that's being committed, and also for the purposes of protecting the investigation so it can be ongoing and find the truth.
Are you familiar with orders of federal courts to seal documents such as these?
Yes.
In this second meeting, what was Nate Paul and his lawyer's demeanor toward you and Mr. Penley?
I think that they were maybe not as gracious as they were during the first meeting. I think they understood by this point that...
Excuse me, Ranger. Object to what he thinks they understood. That's conjecture and speculation.
Sustained.
Well, what my answer is, my question is not what you thought they thought, but what was their demeanor. So what was their demeanor?
It was a little more animated than the first meeting.
Did anything happen at that meeting to change your initial assessment of whether this should be elevated to the level of an actual investigation?
No.
To clear that up, when you got this, did you start an investigation as that term is understood?
Ask your question again.
Yes. did you start an investigation? Did you initiate an official investigation?
No.
What do you do when you start an investigation?
When you start an investigation, you assign it to an investigative group. It is assigned an investigative number and it's put into the record.
And the reason that even after this second meeting, it had not risen to the level of investigation, what's that reason?
The reason was that the allegations had no merit and we weren't going to do the investigation if I had anything to say about it.
All right. Even though, and did you make that clear to not only now Mr. Paul and his lawyer, but also Mr. Penley?
Yes.
Even though that was your position, did you agree to submit their documents to your experts within the office?
Yes.
Okay. So was there a third meeting?
There was.
When was that third meeting?
It was on August 12th.
Was it clear to you by then what General Paxton wanted done?
Objection, conjecture, and speculation.
Was it, well, let me clear that up. Was it clear to you from what General Paxton told Mr. Mateer or Mr. Penley what General Paxton wanted done?
That's actually worse. That's hearsay and conjecture and speculation.
Actually, no, Your Honor, it's under 801E2D.
Counselor, you're going to make me look at these numbers, aren't you?
Yes, yes, Your Honor.
He's just trying to throw you off.
801E2E says that a statement such as this is not hearsay, particularly
With respect.
when it is, excuse me,
I'm sorry, Dick, go ahead.
particularly when it was made by the party's agent or employee on a matter within the scope of that relationship. And here it's what General Paxton told to either Mateer or to Penley that was passed to the witness.
With respect.
That is not hearsay.
I'm sorry, Dick. With respect, Your Honor, there's a difference between what General Paxton said and what Ranger Maxwell can opine about General Paxton's state of mind. Those are two different things.
Not asking that.
You just did.
Sustained.
Well, let me ask it again then, if that's how it was understood. What message was passed to you by either Penley or Mateer that General Paxton had ordered done?
General Paxton wanted to have a third meeting.
I'm sorry. Objection. Objection, conjecture, and speculation. I have no problem with Ranger Maxwell testifying as to what General Paxton said, but there's a difference between what he said and what he wanted. I know it's splitting a hair, but objection, non-responsive.
Sustained.
What did he say he wanted?
He wanted us to tell Nate Paul that we were not going to be doing an investigation due to the results of our forensic analysis.
So going into that third meeting, is that what you believed it was going to be about?
Yes.
Was that meeting recorded like the first two?
No.
Who was responsible for it not being recorded?
General Paxton specifically told us that he did not want that meeting recorded.
Okay, so as you're going into a meeting in which you believe it's just for you to tell Nate Paul that you're not going to do his bidding, what happened?
The Nate Paul was there along with his lawyer, Michael Wynn. I had my two forensic experts, Mark Penley, myself, and General Paxton. My forensics people explained to Nate Paul the results of their forensic examination.
And very briefly, what was that result?
That the metadata that he was talking about that had changed could have been changed by the fact that there were documents he received had been electronically redacted and encrypted, which would change the metadata.
Is that a long way of saying there was nothing there?
Yes.
So, your understanding that General Paxton was telling you, tell him not that you're not going to have an investigation. What was General Paxton's, what did he say during that meeting?
During the meeting, he was supporting Nate Paul's position, which was that we need to do an investigation. And he was pretty adamant about it.
Was that meeting heated?
It became heated.
Who became heated?
Nate Paul.
Before that meeting started, were you aware of any public statements that Mr. Paul had made about whether there was an investigation?
Yes, I was.
And what were those public statements you're aware of?
He had done an interview with a business journal and told them that the Texas Attorney General was investigating the FBI and their handling of the search warrants again on his property.
Was that true or not?
That is false.
In fact, you had not started an investigation, correct?
We had not, and I specifically told Mr. Paul that we were not doing an investigation at this point, and our meetings were confidential.
And the response?
Oh yeah, he responded.
What was his response?
He was very angry, and he said that he still has a First Amendment right. And I told him that all you're doing is using the power and the prestige of this office for your own purpose, and I'm not going to allow that.
Whose side in that dispute between you and Nate Paul did General Paxton take?
Nate Paul.
So, what was the significance of Nate Paul making a public statement that the Attorney General's office was investigating a federal magistrate and the federal authorities and the state authorities that the Attorney General was investigating? What's the significance of that kind of public statement?
Excuse me. Objection, conjecture, and speculation.
Sustained.
All right. Why did you think, what was your state of mind about why such a public statement, when it was not true about the Attorney General investigating these law enforcement people, what was your state of mind about why that was improper?
It was improper because Nate Paul was a criminal, and General Paxton was using the office to try to his benefit.
Can the very start of an investigation into a public figure be damaging to that public figure?
Yes, it can.
I'm sorry.
Is that-
Excuse me, Dick. Pardon me, Ranger. Objection, conjecture, and speculation.
Overruled.
You may answer.
Repeat the question.
Yes, can the very public start of an investigation against a public figure be damaging, almost like a tattoo to that public figure?
I got to object to leading in the tattoo. I'm sorry. Objection, leading.
Well, I'll reverse it. I'll take the
Sustained.
tattoo out of
Take the
it.
tattoo out.
Sustained.
If I take the tattoo out of it, may I ask the question again?
I just sustained that. You can try whatever you'd like to and see what he objects
Okay.
to or not.
Is there a danger to a public official's reputation by publicizing an investigation by the Attorney General, and especially when it's not true?
Yes, very much so.
Is that the reason you're very careful about having a criteria for starting an investigation?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
What is the reason you're careful
We're
about
careful. We're careful because we don't want to put a stain on anyone's reputation. It has to be an investigation that is viable, has probable cause, and could move forward. This was not that.
that? All right. So let's talk about what happened after that meeting. Did you ever have any further conversations with Attorney General Paxton?
No, Attorney General Paxton stopped talking to me.
And your assessment at that time of whether General Paxton was angry with you?
Excuse me, conjecture and speculation.
It's his state of mind.
Sustained. You can ask it differently if you'd like.
All right. Your state of mind after General Paxton and you left that meeting was what? About General Paxton?
Unless he said anything, conjecture and speculation. He's got nothing to base it on.
Overruled.
You may answer.
I know his state of mind because in the meeting he threatened to fire me. So I knew then what his commitment was to Nate Paul, and he was not going to be deterred from continuing to try and do things that benefit Nate Paul.
During this period of time with these 3 meetings, had you called upon any of your subordinates, any of your other investigators to, other than to look at this metadata, had you called on anyone to assist you in this review?
No.
Why not?
I told my people that this was going to get me fired. I was going to take the stand, and I was not going to jeopardize any of their careers by involving them.
Why did you think it was going to get you fired?
Excuse me.
He
Object-
demonstrated
excuse
his commitment to
Ranger.
Nate Paul.
Witness, hold one moment.
State of mind.
Your objection?
Objection, conjecture, and speculation.
Overruled.
For his state of mind. Yes, you may answer.
He had already told me that if I conducted my business as the FBI does, he was going to fire me. So I know that he was angry with me because I was not buying in to the big conspiracy theory that Nate Paul was having him believe.
And at this time, did you know that there was some action within the Attorney General's office to hire an outside counsel to do what you refused to do, and that is conduct an investigation into the federal authorities that were hounding Nate Paul?
I'm sorry.
Take out hounding, that were conducting their investigation on Nate Paul.
Objection, vague. When is this time? I'm not sure where
Okay,
we are.
I'll clarify.
Sustained. Clarify, please.
At this time, we're now talking about the end after the 3rd meeting. Did you know that there was some movement for General Paxton to demand the hiring of a special counsel or an outside counsel? Did you know about it at that time?
No.
As far as you were concerned, was the Attorney General's office involvement in Nate Paul's complaints about how he'd been treated or mistreated, in his words, by the investigation into his activities? Was the Attorney General's office involvement over?
No, I didn't think it was because I knew that he was probably going to fire me and hire somebody who would do it.
Excuse me. Objection, non-responsive, and conjecture and speculation. With all due respect to Ranger Maxwell, he's not the amazing Kreskin. He can't see everything in the future.
I'm asking for his state of mind.
Overruled.
You may answer.
Yes, I did not believe that General Paxton was going to stop pursuing this investigation.
Did you at that time, though, know about the hiring or attempted hiring of Brandon Kamak, the young lawyer from Houston?
No,
Did you find out about it later?
I did.
I want to jump ahead now to the very end of September and the beginning of October. Did you go on a vacation toward the end of September?
Yes,
And where'd you go?
we went to Colorado.
Did you learn, don't tell us what was said yet, but did you learn that there was a crisis of sorts among the deputies, your fellow deputies in the Attorney General's office?
I did.
How did you learn it?
They contacted me.
And did you, even being in Colorado, they have phones up there last time I checked. Were you able to communicate with your fellow deputies?
I had to drive down the mountain to do it, but yes, I did communicate with them by phone.
What did you learn?
I learned that all the executive deputies, including Jeff Mateer, were going to stand shoulder to shoulder with me and confront General Paxton with what he has been doing to the agency for the benefit of Nate Paul.
What about a plan to go to the Federal Bureau of Investigation to report what they believed were, and what you believed, I believe, were crimes being committed?
Objection, leading.
What did you learn?
And again, what time frame are we talking about? Your question was late September.
Time frame is the end of September.
Sustain, re-ask.
Time frame is the end of September. In your conversations with your fellow deputies, what did you learn the plans were?
I learned that they were going to report the activities to the FBI. I learned that they had written a letter to General Paxton. I was not present, so I could not sign it. And I told them that I would also contact Lieutenant Colonel Randy Prince with the Texas Department of Public Safety and also tell him what was going on and that we were going to request an investigation.
So you knew Lieutenant Colonel Prince as a fellow Ranger, didn't you?
Yes, I broke him in.
And so by reporting to the Department of Public Safety, Lieutenant Colonel Prince, where was he in the hierarchy of the Department of Public Safety?
He is number 2, or he was number 2 in the department. He's now retired.
And at the time that you did that, were you making a report to law enforcement about General Paxton?
Yes.
What did you think would happen to you as a result of you reporting General Paxton to authorities?
Conjecture and speculation, Judge.
State of mind.
Judge, everything that doesn't get to come into evidence as state of mind.
Overruled.
You may answer.
I was going to be fired.
What happened on, I believe it was October 2nd, 2 days after the report? What happened on that date regarding you?
I received notification by text message from Greg Simpson, the division chief over human resources, notifying me that I was placed on investigative leave.
As a result of being placed on investigative leave, what did that do to your responsibilities in the Attorney General's office?
At that time, I had no responsibilities, had no access.
And how long did that situation last?
For 1 month.
What happened then?
On November 2nd, 2020, I met with Brent Webster, and he terminated me.
Stop you. Who was Brent Webster by that time?
Brent Webster was the new first assistant hired by General Paxton.
Would you describe for the Senate and the senators what happened when Brent Webster fired you on, was it, did you say November the 2nd?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I was told to show up at 9 a.m. In the conference room next to Human Resources, and that I would be meeting with Brent Webster.
Were you still a law enforcement officer?
Yes.
Were you told anything about whether to bring a weapon or not?
My division chief over Criminal Investigation Division called me on the telephone when I was en route to the office, and he told me that Brent Webster said that I would not allowed to be in the building if I was armed.
So what happened after you went to this, or showed up at the time you were supposed to show up?
I got there at before 9. I'm pretty much always early. And I waited till about 11:30 before Brent Webster showed up.
What happened then?
Brent Webster and Aaron Wrights came together, and they first asked me if I was recording this meeting, and I said no.
And you were not.
I was not.
Did you ask them?
I asked them if they were recording the meeting, and they said they were not.
And then what happened?
Then Brent Webster told me that he was conducting an investigation.
Did you believe that?
No.
And in fact, did his actions confirm your non-belief?
Yes.
What happened then?
So he attempted to interview me in a very vague and inept way, and I told him, just ask the question, I'll answer it, or I won't answer it. Just give me a direct question, and I'll give you what you want to know. We never got to the point where he asked me any really direct questions.
All right. How did it end?
He told me he left, and he told me to be back at 1 o'clock. And so I went, had some lunch, and I came back to the office at 1 o'clock.
Did he show up?
No.
What happened?
About 4:30, members of Human Resources showed up with my paperwork, and I signed the paperwork, and I was fired.
I want to talk just a moment about what I'll call retaliation. Were you retaliated against for what your actions that you took in this case?
Yes.
Tell the members of the Senate briefly how you were retaliated against.
That he retaliated against me, is what
Yes.
you're asking. Well, in firing me, at the time I was 71 years old and had risen to a top level of law enforcement. In effect, when he fired me and then berated me in the news, he ended my career.
By that time, your career had taken up how many years?
It was 48 years.
Were you proud of your career?
Absolutely.
What is an F5 form? That's an F as in Frank 5, the number.
It's a TCOL form.
TCOL means what?
Texas Commission on Law Enforcement.
What's the importance of TCOL?
TCOL is the regulatory agency for all peace officers in the state of Texas.
And so what happened at first with regard to your TCO license and the F5 form?
The F5 form is a form that is required for the agency to fill out anytime they separate from a law enforcement officer. There are three things that you can mark on the F5. It can be an honorable discharge, it can be dishonorable, or it can be a general discharge.
Is a general discharge good or bad?
Bad.
Did you contest that?
I did.
Did you join in the filing of a whistleblower lawsuit? We call
I
it
did.
that. Why did you sue?
I sued because he ended my career in a very unjust manner.
Eventually, partly as a result of the lawsuit, was the general discharge reversed and you got an honorable discharge.
Yes,
Is that important?
yes,
Why?
because it's important to me to show that I had an honorable discharge and that I did nothing wrong by standing up for right.
Pass the witness.
Mr. Cogdell? Take as much time as you need.
Thank you. You good, Dick? Good afternoon, Ranger.
Good afternoon, Counselor.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good. It's
Mr.
been a minute.
Cogdell, I'm sorry, since you're a little taller, you're going to need to get closer to that microphone so we can,
Wait, I'm
or
taller
raise
than
that
Dick?
up. There you go.
All right.